whose cause for canonization has also been introduced by the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. He died in 1984, and he had spent 23 agonizing years in Soviet prisons and gulags, the labor camps of Siberia. Father Walter Ciszek. And he likewise talked about the strength that their secret masses would give to the prisoners there in the prison camps there in Siberia. He wrote 2 books about his experiences. One is called With God in Russia, and the other is more about the priesthood and the Mass, called He Leadeth Me. I highly recommend them. They're books you just can't put down once you start to read them and his experiences, but also the faith which he faced, his hardships. He spent 5 years, I think it was, in solitary confinement too, as they were trying to drive him crazy. But again, it was through his faith and so on that he was able to maintain his mental well-being. But he talked about when he was at the labor camps and they would be sent out with just barely enough food for the day and barely enough shelter in the freezing cold. They'd be sent out to work in the mines. And he talks about the strength that the Eucharist brought to them, their secret masses that they would have there. He says, you cannot explain all this, I know, to those who do not believe. Even for many Christians, I fear the notion of the Blessed Sacrament as the bread of life is somehow only a poetic or symbolic phrase used by Jesus in the Gospel. Yet what a source of sustenance it was to us then, and how much it meant to us to have the body and blood of Christ as the food of our spiritual lives in this sacrament of love and joy. The experience was very real, he wrote. You can feel its effects upon your mind and heart, upon your daily life. For us, it was a necessity to foster the life of the soul, just as much as our daily bread was necessary to sustain the body. He continues, when I reached the prison camps of Siberia, I learned to my great joy that it was possible to say Mass daily once again. In every camp, the priests and prisoners would go to great lengths, run risks willingly, just to have the consolation of this sacrament. For those who could not get to Mass, we daily consecrated hosts and arranged for the distribution of communion to those who wished to receive. Our risk of discovery, of course, was greater in the barracks because of the lack of privacy and the presence of informers. Most often, therefore, we said our daily Mass somewhere at the work site during the noon break. Despite this added hardship, everyone observed a strict Eucharistic fast from the night before, passing up a chance for breakfast and working all morning on an empty stomach. Yet no one complained. Think about that. They were just barely given enough food to survive. And yet, in order for them, and at that time that was the church's discipline, you had to observe a fast from midnight onward. So they would forego their meager breakfast, work on an empty stomach. Why? So that they could attend Mass, they could receive Holy Communion. And he says, yet no one complained. In small groups, the prisoners would shuffle into the assigned place, and there the priest would say Mass in his working clothes, unwashed, disheveled, bundled up against the cold. We said Mass in drafty storage shacks, or huddled in mud and slush in the corner of the building site. The intensity of devotion of the priests and prisoners made up for everything. There were no altars, candles, bells, flowers, music, snow-white linens, stained glass, or the warmth that even the simplest parish church could offer. Yet in these primitive conditions, the Mass brought you closer to God than anyone might conceivably imagine. The realization of what was happening on the board, box, or stone used in place of an altar penetrated deep into the soul. Distractions caused by fear of discovery, which accompanied each saying of the Mass under such conditions, took nothing away from the effect that tiny bit of bread and few drops of consecrated wine produced upon the soul. Many a time as I folded up the handkerchief on which the body of our Lord had lain and dried the glass or tin cup used as a chalice,